Hey everybody, it's Gail, and this is Errata-Hate, and this episode is going to be a retrospective of the projects I made in 2020. I ended up crocheting about 10 miles of yarn. It was a little bit over. I track it that way just because the visualization helps me. So now I thought it would just be fun to look at some photos and I can talk about what I liked or disliked about a project or what I learned. So let's just get right into it. So the first thing I completed in 2020 was this sweater, which was made out of Lion Brand Terry spun. And it was very soft and squishy. It was cozy, but I was just sort of fucking about when I was making it, so it didn't fit in like 3 spots. So it now lives with my best friend, who will make it totally work. I have no fear of that. I really liked working with the Terry spun because it was soft and floaty and it didn't shed. I was afraid when I first started working with it, it was going to shed everywhere, but it ended up being a yarn that was pretty good at keeping together, so that was quite nice. I loved the off-the-shoulder look I did for this one. I loved the length of it, but like I said, because I wasn't really paying attention to measurements, it was kind of not quite right in a few different places. By the way, enjoy watching my hair turn a bunch of different colors in these photos. So project number 2 was a shawlette that I made with the coral yarn on the trim was leftover baby yarn from, I think it was Lion Brand Jamie. I'd need to double check that. I don't recall other than that. And then this yellow was a discontinued yarn that I had bought at my yarn shop, Fiber Rhythm, here in Portland. And I wanted to make a shawl. Basically, I wanted to make a shawl because I wanted to take this lace design that you see at the bottom on the bottom edge and see what it looked like, because it was something I was sort of imagining and I needed to see it in real life. I'm not actually great at visualization. So I really like the lace pattern that I came up with, but this taught me that it needs a little tweaking, and that while it's a pattern that's really interesting, I need to find the exact right amount of stitches and layout that will really let it shine, because it's a layered lace. And if I can figure that out, I think it's really going to be something special. So after I finished the shawl, I went into jacket mode. This was actually not supposed to be a jacket. I started out making the multicolored shoulder bit first as a shawl using Lion Brand Shawl in a Ball, which I really like. And then what happened was I started this and I thought this will be a pretty shawl. I'll probably just send it to someone, and then quarantine happened. And so I just kept adding to it. So the orange that you see and the blue that you see at the bottom edge on the long edge, those were both just added to the shawl once I decided the shawl was long enough, and it is a angled shawl. So I set it up so that it's got little stair steps on both edges so that it's getting shorter on one end while it's getting longer on the other, which is what causes the asymmetrical look. And when I attached the orange, I decided, rather than trying to figure out exactly how to make an armhole for this, because it was me just sort of goofing around, I just decided an armhole will go here, and I did a bunch of chain stitches and skipped a bunch of stitches and then brought the blue in at the end to make those drop sleeves. I love this piece. This is all acrylic yarn. It all softened up real nice. It's got a beautiful drape to it. It's in my closet right now waiting for me to need it again. It's become one of my just standard pieces to throw on if I'm a little chilly working at home, or I just want something kind of over my schlubby clothes while I'm out running errands. So I would love to turn this into a pattern at some point. If you would like to see a pattern for this, let me know, because that will actually encourage me a little more, because then I'm not just doing it for me. Next up, we have, this is going to be a double shot of Bruce the Goose, which is this ceramic goose I've had in the house forever. So before quarantine, I had plans to go to Emerald City Comic Con, and I have a Captain Marvel jacket that I've been making for years and that I've been wearing as a cosplay for years. And then of course the movie came out 2019. And so my plan was to take my ceramic goose and dress up Bruce in this orange poncho that I made here to go as Goose the cat. So Bruce the goose would be going as Goose the cat. I'm very, very funny. So this was just made by doing this long neck you see here and then realizing like there was so much increasing that had to be done to fit over the actual shape of the goose. And this was a sport weight yarn. It came out really well. I think he's still wearing it. He came with a whole bunch of outfits I never put him into, and so I'm sure he's still wearing it. But, spoiler for 2019 Captain Marvel, there is a second part to being Goose the Cat that is very, very important if you're going to cosplay Goose the Cat, and that is the tentacles, which I made. So I know he's wearing these right now because I was just looking at him in the living room a minute ago. I made these tentacles with a elastic hair tie to fit around the beak, and then each tentacle was stitched on individually, and then I worked down the side and went to the next tentacle, and I made all of them, and then I went back through on a final round once I'd finished all the tentacles and just did wire on the outsides like they were a little more live. And I've been referring to this as the Eldritch Honker. Again, I'm very funny. So once Bruce was all kitted out in his finery, we were, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks into the quarantine here in Portland and just found out that it was getting pushed out again. And we like our upstairs neighbors a lot. I needed a project to work on that was fun for me, so I made the upstairs neighbors a bowling set. It does have a full 10 pins. I just like dick jokes wherever I can find them. I found this pattern on Amazon. If it is still there, it will be linked below. I'm not sure it is. And so this is just 10 wooden licking pins and then these 2 bowling balls. Now the original pattern does have a whole process for putting finger holes into the balls. That is quite a clever design. I wasn't in the mood, so I skipped that part. The pins were made from Silk City Fibers, 100% cotton. It's a Cascade Yarns dupe. Cascade had a, what was it called? They had a great nubby cotton yarn that I made the big garter blanket out of way, way back. And they discontinued it, which was a real disappointment for me because I loved it. But there is this dupe from Silk City Fibers. Sky City Fibers? Something. And then the bowling balls I just made with some leftover Care and Simply Soft I had around, and I wanted 2 colors so that when people were playing they would know which one was theirs. So the neighbors loved it. Obviously we can't hear them play it because it's all made of yarn and stuffing, but that kind of made it extra fun for me because it was something they could do and, you know, it wouldn't cause extra noise. They don't make a lot of noise. I thought it was fun that someone came up with a way to bowl without making a shit ton of noise. So next up came the Circles necklace, which became an Errata-Hate how-to. And I will link to that how-to in the basement. This was made with wooden circles that I joined as I went, and that how-to breaks it all down. I love these colors. I love this necklace. I should not have made it out of fisherman's wool because it's very, very itchy. So I need to just find new colors and make another one because I haven't worn it since the video because it was so itchy. One of those downsides to not paying attention to what you're using. And now I think we're coming into a series. Yeah, we're coming into a series of commissions. So this is a BAMF. I actually used this project to talk about the difference between craft epoxy and contact cement in another Errata-Hate video, which again will be linked in the basement. And this is made using Bernay Velvet for the purple, and then just Karen Simply Soft for all the other pieces, and then Dollhouse beer bottles to glue all around because BAMFs are an X-Men character who like to steal beer, and they can teleport. So that's what the purple is. It's the smoke of the teleportation. And then they have prehensile tails, which is why he's holding a beer bottle, and then the idea is that he's kind of burst into the room with all these beer bottles around him. And yes, they are somewhat related to Nightcrawler, if you're wondering. The next commission after that was this blanket, which I did the pattern review for the channel, again, down in the basement. I love this pattern so much. It's so fun. It's so adjustable. And it's just a really clever design. And it's the kind of design that I don't come up with because my brain doesn't think like this. Like I said, I don't visualize pretty much at all in my brain when I'm figuring out how to do stuff. I don't come up with sort of new ideas of how things can fit together. So I love that there are people out there who can do that and then put out something as fun as this. I still need to do this in the most obnoxious neons I can find because I need that in my life. Once that blanket was done, or probably at the same time as that blanket, I got commissioned to make this set of pot holders. I have a few of these sets set up as commissions on my Etsy. These are a reference to a really funny line in the Daredevil comics. I also do a Hawkeye version that you're going to see later, and I'll also just do personalized pot holders if anyone's asking for them. I'm still working on a pattern for these. I started it and then dropped it and then started it and then dropped it, and it is not a very hard pattern. I mean, they're pot holders, they're squares. It's pretty simple, but I'm very picky, so it's taken a while. Next up we have, this is my homage to that amazing mesh dress that Journey Smollett was wearing in Birds of Prey. That was the last movie I saw in theaters before everything closed down. And I'm also a huge fan of Black Canary from the comics. And the yellow that you see in the straps and in the little side pieces on the thighs call back to the fact that Black Canary's costume in the comics has always had a little bit of yellow in it somewhere. And then I used this purple because I had this purple and I loved it. This mesh pattern that I used for it, I based off of what I could tell from the costume design. And so this is sort of a reinforced mesh where I would do the mesh and then I would do I think it was two rows of single crochet and then do more mesh so that it had a little more structure. It felt a little heavier. And it wasn't quite as flowy because the dress in the movie does have some weight to it. So I really loved putting this one together. It was a lot of fun. Might have been the most fun I had on a project all year. And I mean, I always enjoy crocheting, but this one kind of came together really nicely. The one thing I learned, which I didn't learn well enough, I might add, because I've had this problem again already, is that these straps are a little too long because I didn't measure how long the straps actually needed to be. And I didn't remember that the next time I made a dress. And so now I have to go back and fix straps on a different dress. I wrote it down this time. Hopefully I'll remember. And now, here we are at the bane of my existence for 2020. The fucking cat couch. I made 2 of these. And the first time I made it in burgundy. And I double checked all of my measurements, all of my gauging. I checked and I checked and I checked, and nothing fit right because there's a whole foam element. You're bending foam over, you're piling foam on top of each other, you're trying to fit this all together, and in the pattern it all looks very nice. And of course, you know, photography for a professional pattern is always going to look really nice. That's how they get you to buy the thing. But the difference between the size they told me I needed to have in terms of gauge and the actual size of the cushions that all of this had to be stretched over were 2 very different things. If you go to the Ravelry page I have for this project, I have really extensive notes about the differences I added to the pattern to actually make it work with the size I was given for the foam pieces, because the size of it is perfect. And I think it's a really cute project. And it taught me a lot about working with foam, which was great because I needed another piece of crafting paraphernalia in the house, of course. But it also taught me that my instincts as I was working on it was, this looks too small. Oh, it must just be me. The gauge is working out fine. It should be fine. My instincts are pretty good on that, and I should trust them when that happens, because I made a note of every change I made to make it fit the first time, and also changes I would make to a new one to make it fit better the second time, because there were pieces of this original I didn't make changes to when I was stitching it. I just kind of stretched it over and hope for the best. And I made the second one, and it was absolutely perfect. It was still very tight. This is the second one, so you can still see the foam through it. But it was all a lot easier to put together. It was a lot easier to sew all the various pieces on. So the changes I made were super helpful to me. And because the original pattern just said worsted weight yarn and didn't give any examples, I don't know what they used that was supposed to actually fit perfectly the first time, because I was using Mighty Stitch, Knit Picks Mighty Stitch on both of mine. I was using the hooks they said to use. I was using the, like I said, I was using the measurements they gave me. I was cutting to those measurements in terms of the foam, and it just never came together correctly until I made a bunch of changes myself. So I would be very curious to know what they used and how it actually works out differently to Mighty Stitch, which is a fairly stretchable acrylic. But rant over. I love these booties. I made 2 sets of these booties this year because Sean had 2 cousins who gave birth, I think, about a month apart. I would link this pattern and highly encourage you to go and use it, because I love that it's these little galoshes, and they have instructions for doing it with like a different colored sole, and I think they're great. They're very well made. The pattern is no longer available, sadly. So, they're super cute though, and now I can show them to you. Aren't they great? And I always make booties at least a size larger than newborn, because I have made the newborn sizes in booties a few times and the kid has come out with big feet. So these are actually the 6 to 12 month ones, just to be sure they would be big enough by the time I got them out the door. And I think they both made it out the door right before the babies were born. I think I nailed it, which is the first time that's ever happened. So I have an upcoming video about vintage patterns, and I've fallen in love with them over the last couple of years, and this snood cap in the photo is one of the reasons. And I'm not showing you the back because you can't really see the stitch pattern on the shot of the back, because it's brought together and tied to a gathered position. But I love this snood cap. I will link to the pattern I used. I found it on Etsy. It's made of thread, so this was a thread crochet thing that I kind of challenged myself to last year, because I have a lot of projects that require thread that I would like to work on. You'll see a couple of those popping up soon. And I really enjoyed making this cap. I had just shaved my head not 3 weeks before I finished this. Like, I shaved it clean off. And so the poofiness that is in this snood to accommodate the fact that you might have a lot of hair is not shown in this photo, because I didn't have poofy hair at the time. As you can tell, I do have my poof back, but it's still pretty short. We will see what happens over the next few months. But yeah, this was the beginning of me falling down a vintage pattern hole that I have not recovered from, and is only getting more dangerous by the day. It's just, there's so many pretty things. Oh yes, my Gryffindor scarves. So I made these, and fuck J.K. Rowling and her turfy bullshit. So yeah, I got commissioned for these shortly after J.K. Rowling went full asshole turf. After spending years just hinting at being an asshole turf. And I always love a reason to make Hogwarts scarves, because it's generally for you know, kids who are still like in love with the magic and all of that of the series. And these were based off the movie scarves from, I think, the third movie forward. I forget when we went to the small secondary color stripes as opposed to the equal blocks of color. But these were a fairly quick one. I believe it was 12 rows of burgundy, a row of gold, 2 rows of burgundy, another row of gold, repeat. So these were a very quick, fun project, all done in double crochet, done with Red Heart Super Saver, because I try to never send anything to any kids that cannot be just washed and dried unto eternity, because kids. This is a different set of pot holders. These were custom made. I made them for myself originally. These are lines from Law & Order SVU. And so I made these to amuse myself, and then someone asked if I could make them a set, and I said yes. And so there are actually 2 sets, but I only have 1 set on my Ravelry, and you don't really need 2 sets of the same thing to look at a project retrospective. So yeah, these are just the same thing I do with all of them. Bunch of single crochet, back stitching on the embroidery to make the letters, and go forward. And this was actually about the time I started writing the pattern for these, because I realized I had actually figured out what I wanted all the letters to look like in this alphabet, which I'm sure for other people probably goes a lot faster, but it took me a long time to really figure out how to shape all the letters on a fairly small amount of space. Excuse me. Next up we have, of course, Miss Bean doing her best posing while I stand in the background and look cute in this giant sweater I made. So I made this with Knit Picks Brava Bulky, and the entire intention of this sweater was to make that diamond pattern in bobble stitches that you see, to get me ready to start working more cables in crochet. And I decided to do it with bobbles rather than trying to do cables, because I've been having some iffiness working cables, and what I wanted to do was just commit myself to the idea that I would need to pay attention and need to keep up with where things were, so that this design that I had in my head would show up correctly. I made it entirely too big by accident. See issues I've previously had with measurement. But I decided, fuck it, let's embrace it. That lighter purple was folded over Mighty Stitch, that I then worked in decreasing rows to get it into something like a neckline, and then lined the edges of the sleeves with. And then you can't see it in this photo, but there is also a stripe of that lilac that goes down the whole seaming, because this was a rectangle sweater, so it started out just a big rectangle that then got seamed. And then I added it to the back of the sweater as well, like the back hem. And this is a high-low sweater, which once I realized I had sort of messed up my measurements, I was like, let's go big on this and just go for it. This is a super cozy sweater. It looks awesome with leggings. I love it so much. Another one I would be happy to do a pattern for. I've been wanting to do a rectangle sweater pattern because they are the easiest to explain how to measure for you. And something big I learned on this one is any sweater I make where the front and the back are going to be equal width is going to be huge on me, because I don't have 30 double G boobs on my back. So my back is not nearly as wide as my front. Which seems like I should know that, but a lot of last year was realizing the things I didn't think about instinctively about how to measure and shape things. So I found it very funny. I would love to try to do a rectangle sweater that actually measures my back correctly, just, you know, to try it. So now we're going to move into a couple of blankets. This is the first one. I did this with Brene Velvet on this was on a P-stitch. And it was 3 skeins of the darker purple, and then I think about 1.5 of the brighter purple. What happened was I had bought 3 skeins of the darker purple thinking it was the brighter purple, because I have a pattern in party crochet that uses a similar yarn, and I wanted to use that yarn on it. and I got the wrong color. So I kind of threw out the chance for someone to get a blanket from me for cheap, because I'd gotten the wrong color, and somebody grabbed me for it and said, yes, please. And this was the first time I worked a continuous granny join. And I think it's a really clever way to join a blanket. I was not good at it the first time. And the person I sent it to was not concerned that it turned out way larger than expected. They have cats. I'm sure the cats are going to enjoy having a big squishy blanket. But then someone else asked if I would make them a blanket as well, because they wanted something out of Bernay velvet but cannot stitch with it themselves. So I said yes, and I went back down to the K hook, which is the recommended hook for the yarn. And as you can see, it's a very different looking blanket. You can also see here that my continuous join came out very well, and I like knowing that I can do the continuous join with, you know, the big floppy oversized squares, and it's going to hold together. But I also like seeing the continuous join on this blanket because you can see how neat it is, both as a way to seam something so that it's very pretty, but also it's just a neat looking join. It's a lot of fun. And the trick to it is making sure that you get those four corner meets done correctly. Like, that's where I was having issues. So getting the chance to do the first one, kind of fuck up a little bit, and then do a second one but kind of focus on doing it more within the recommended hook size, was a great way to see where the differences were and how it changed, like the look and the feel of the blanket. These are both very warm blankets because it's that Bernay velvet, but because this one is granny squares on a smaller scale, it has more warmth just laying on you, whereas the other one you'll need to layer it a little bit. But I really had fun with them. They were very quick. And I think this one was also 3 skeins of the blue, and then I believe it was 2 skeins of the silver. Like, it takes quite a bit of yarn to do the join. And so just keep that in mind. It also adds about, depending on the size of yarn you're using, it can add anywhere between 1/2 inch to 2 inches between squares, which can definitely change the width and length of your project as you're working on it. So if you've been wanting to do a continuous granny join, just keep that in mind before you do it, that the size of your square itself, you're gonna need to add a little more space to, and that can take you from something that you thought was 50 inches up to something that can be much wider because of, depending on how many squares you need to join. I do love that join. I'm gonna use it again soon on a project I'll talk about here. After those commissions, I took a break and made this very pretty scarf for my bestie. What happened was we saw the Colorado poncho pattern in Interweave, and I will link that pattern below. And I think it's a great poncho. It's got a cool feel to it. It looks like a lot of fun. I was not in the mood to make a poncho, but I was in the mood to practice my cables, which the poncho has. So I just took the chunk of the pattern where the cables are and made that into a scarf. It was very easy. It taught me, the thing it taught me the most, I think, was I've kind of been making cables wrong the entire time I've been making cables. The way this pattern works is you work rows of single crochet in between the cable rows, and then you make in this case make triple crochet cables instead of double crochet cables, so you have that extra length so that those cables can touch and you don't pull everything in. Now you can see that things are still a little bendy and twisty on the edges of this scarf, but not nearly as badly as some of my other cabled stuff has been. Or other post stuff, like any front post stuff I've done. So I really liked making this. I love that these two tones look so good together. I love where the tones split. That was a complete accident because I ran out of yarn and ordered the wrong color and said, fuck it. So I just got to remind myself, make sure I keep a label around, because I had thrown all the labels out and thought I had the right color picked and didn't think to double check. So that one's on me. next to last project for last year, the dog has a lot of toys because she's spoiled. So I made a big ass basket. And I made this with 3 skeins of Brene blanket that I had. I doubled up all the skeins. I doubled up the yarn. So the base is a different color than the sides, but it was all done on a P-hook. It was a very heavy project to work on because it's already a super bulky yarn, and then you double up on that yarn and it just gets heavier. But that did mean that it's got that internal structure to stand up straight for the most part. Something I did do on this project, once I finished the overall basket, was I then cut a piece of foam and used contact cement to stick it in the bottom of the basket so there would be a real proper base to this thing so that it would stand up a little straighter and also just be able to stay put a little better, because these are all very light toys. And I didn't want to risk that, you know, I'd kick this thing because it's right under a coat rack and then it would go skidding and toys would go flying. So I did that with some foam that I had. By the way, if you do end up using foam for any project, I cannot recommend getting a foam knife enough, because the way that foam works, you can't cut it with scissors really well because it condenses the foam, which makes it harder to cut through. Whereas a foam knife is just, it can come in a few different varieties. Mine looks like a big cheese slicer, like the ones you get with the hand and the wire. The wire heats up and then you slice in whatever direction you need. I think I will be doing a video about that sometime soon because I think it's a really cool tool. And then finally, I ended the year with pot holders. These are one of my standard sets. These are actually lines from a Hawkeye comic, but are also great if somebody you know is kind of known for not being great in the kitchen, and it doesn't mean they're a bad cook. Maybe they're just clumsy. Or they're like me and they have no instincts in the kitchen, so it's all a very confusing process. But again, I love these. We've got I've made a bunch of these for our houses, and made them for commissions and for shows and everything, and they hold up. And the big difference with these that makes them different from the ones you saw before is that I actually used Red Heart Love on these, which I'd never done before. I'd always used Super Saver or Karen 1 Pound, and they came out exactly the same, and it was much nicer on my hands because you need a pretty tight single crochet to get the thickness that you need, so they're really good pot holders. And the Red Heart Love is just a softer yarn than the Super Saver or the 1 Pound, so it was just nice to not put quite so much pressure on my hands. So that was soon. That's going to start showing you some of the projects I'm working on this year. You're going to see some stuff that's similar to what you saw. You're going to see some very different stuff. But, you know, again, if anything there really, you know, made you happy and you want to, you want to order it, my Etsy info is down below. You can message me there. If you want to make it, and I don't have a pattern for it. I don't think anything there I have a written down pattern for. Yeah, I don't. You can just let me know in the comments that you would like to see it as a pattern, and it's something that I can, you know, put on my list because I am wanting to write more patterns this year. And so I'll kind of know how to prioritize things once I finish the pot holder pattern, which I might be able to do this weekend. We'll see. Maybe. We'll see. It's a whole very tetchy process because my day job is a tech writer, so my pattern writing is super intense. Because I learned all the things that like make it easier to use documentation, so I'm very big on mine being like super good. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna stitch. I will see you guys soon. As always, if you enjoy what I do here on Errata-Hate, please like, subscribe, and share. If you're looking for a pattern, check out my Etsy or my Ravelry or my Gumroad. They're available on all three of those platforms. If you do not have a preference about where to buy, Ravelry or Gumroad would actually be best because Etsy takes a variety of fees, whereas Gumroad and Ravelry charge a very flat rate. So a little better for me. Yeah, that's it. I will see you guys soon, and happy stitching.